Hey, little rollerblader, are you okay?
Hey! Will you guys stop talking about rollerblading?
Why? Are you afraid you're missing out on something?
Yes?
Welcome to episode 7 of the Blade Rat podcast. Part 2 is an hour-and-a-half conversation about the history of 616. We talk about creating blade accessory brands, the 90s, ASA, X Games, In Code, Blood, Pride, and True, Halo Supercars, and what you can do to contribute to blading. Part 2 opens with Mark Vanderbough explaining the genesis of 616. Mark mentions one of his best friends, Casey Turner, which happens to be a mutual friend of mine, and mentor of mine. A lot of people believe that everyone is connected through less than 6 people. However, in today's world of blading, it seems to be that we are much more connected than even we imagine.
So Casey knows Titus, who ran the skate park where Aragon grew up.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's crazy how many weird twists and turns things take, and
Right.
yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about the history of 616.
Okay, so 616 officially I started in '95. I was in college. It was really basically just not a company. It was really just a crew. Is how it started. It was, there was myself, Kane Krieger, who ended up kind of being my partner in the beginning, Mike Mosier, who actually helped me run Integrated for a number of years and made a lot of parts for 616 and Night later on down the road, and then a couple other guys, Nick Stockton and Sean Hipskin, and that was kind of our crew. We skated, and we started going to...
That was the 616 crew?
That was the 616 crew.
And what did 616 mean?
At the time, 616 was the area code for basically the entire western half of Michigan. Like, it went from the Indiana-Michigan border at the bottom all the way up to the bridge at the Upper Peninsula. Like, the entire west side was all 616.
Was there any big names back in the day blading at that time? Or was Derek McClain, or were you involved with any?
There really wasn't anyone big, this is, so, we're talking, 94, 95 when we started the crew, and then 95 when we started maybe like going to contests. And, there were some Detroit guys that, they did a video, Mad Lads, I think it came out at the time. And so there was guys coming from Detroit who were good. Most of them ended up like judging the events though that we were skating in, and which was weird. It was just an odd, because we were all a little bit older, and then you see these kids that are like way better than you. But anyway, so we started going to these contests, and we printed a shirt for all of us to wear to represent our crew. And the reason we did 616, again, because it was that whole half of the state. So it was like we wanted to just connect not just our group, but all the bladers in Michigan. And that was one way. It was like, this is our side, Detroit's on the other side. So they got their thing going. So let's do something for us. And
was Detroit doing CDS Detroit, or was there any other brands coming out of the Detroit scene at that time?
At the time, ELF, which Drew Backrack was involved in, which was probably like a pioneer of blade company, like grind plates, backslide plates, like when guys were cutting up pieces of orange safety cones to put on their K2 backslide plates to keep them from wearing out. Like, ELF actually made that as a product. Like, wow. It was genius. And those guys were by far the pioneers. Obviously, you had Charlie at CDS Detroit doing his thing, but he wasn't really a blader. I mean, I think he bladed, but he was much older. He was a business guy. He was just it was an opportunity he saw to get involved with something, and not to discredit him, because he was early in the game and he did a lot of stuff, and did ads and helped grow blading for sure, especially in Detroit area and overall. But yeah, so we did the shirts for us to wear. We went to a couple contests, and I think maybe the second contest, some guys came up to us and were like, "Hey, where'd you get those shirts?" And they're like, "Oh, we made them." And they're like, "Can we get some?" And I was like, "Yeah, we could make some." So we went and printed like another batch of shirts and brought them to like the next contest we went to, and just started selling them. Like $10, have a shirt and represent. And it just kind of, so we started making connections, and that's when we started taking more trips. And NIST came to Detroit in '96, and we were going to ASA in Chicago, and just trying to get out as much as we could and connect with other bladers and stuff. And that's when I was in college. I was a business major, and I started like having to look at, okay, maybe what am I going to do for a living after I graduated from college, and I didn't really want to do. There was a family business. My dad was trying to get me to come back and work for him and stuff, and I was just like, I don't want to do this. So like, what can I do? So in college, as I started looking at making 616 a legitimate business, I was like, okay, let's make a video. Luckily, my roommate at the time, Casey Turner, was a video production major. So I would go out and film everything, and then we would go in and he would basically edit it all for me. And I'd tell him, what sections. He grew up skateboarding, so he understood, the tricks and just the style and everything that we were looking for. And so we produced a video that I just basically, we made copies at the school, and then I just started handing them out to people. Casey was from San Francisco, the Bay Area. So luckily his family still lived there. So one spring break was my first actual kind of trip out to California and getting into the whole industry of things with 616 and trying to promote it. I stayed with his parents in San Francisco and like went around to all the spots that I'd seen in Daily Breads and in VGs, and started connecting with, it was my first trip to what's now A Mall, but it was Aggressive Skate and Surf at the time, or Aggressive Skate and Snow, and went there just to check out a real skate shop, that wasn't modern in Michigan, and connecting with guys there, and then fast forward, Casey goes on to open a skate park in Bad Axe, Michigan, that you and your brother Matt Oz were at. And
I mean, the smallest town in Michigan. I mean, not the smallest, but population 3,400. Some guy shows up from California and says he's going to open a skate park in a Farmville, And me and Matt at the time, we were just getting into blading. I mean, I was probably on blades for maybe 3 years, and Matt was probably on for 5 or 6. But we were ecstatic about a skate park. And little did we know that Casey Turner was great friends with you.
Yeah, it's just, shows how small everything is, and not just industry, but just, the whole world, and connections like that. And
you were the one that got rollerblade products into Casey's skate shop. I mean, we had Abel, Kaiser, Second Regime, 616. It was like you want hard goods or soft goods. You had everything, and you would provide it to the local skate shop. And at the time, there was a lot more bladers, but it was extremely amazing to have that as our. We would have to travel 2 hours to go to Detroit or somewhere else in order to even get skate parts or something else. But you brought it to a small town. Times were probably a little different then, huh?
They were, but at the same time, Casey took a huge risk. Like you said, I mean, it was, you shouldn't be opening a skate park in Bad Axe, Michigan, and but it was just the fact that he had the skateboard background. He had some construction skills. He wanted a place that he could skate. I know, because he had built a half pipe in his father-in-law's barn, and that he was skating. So it was just an opportunity for him to kind of do like what I did with the 616 warehouse later, and build my own private skate park. It was a good excuse for that. But it's also a business, so and he could, I know his passion was for working with troubled youth and that kind of stuff too, and that gave him a great foot in the door to meet a lot of kids and kind of explore that avenue of things for him.
One thing that I really remember about Casey too, what was interesting, is he said he loved skating just perfect transitions. He's a great skateboarder, by the way, but he loves the feel of just the perfect transition. And he told me what he used to do is, whenever he would skate a transition that he really liked, he would measure it up, draw it, he'd figure out all the schematics, and he would bring that back to skate parks, like build them, like Bad Axe Skate Park. Certain ramps were built after some of his favorite ramps back in California. So he would go and kind of make sure the transition's just right. And that was amazing for us, because we were used to weird transitions. The former skate park owner, some of the ramps were a little wonky, but Casey knew exactly what he was doing, and he also had a big respect for bladers, and there was a lot of coping-based, boxes and stuff where most skateboarders might like angle iron, but he was very, very supportive. The reason that I'm into the film industry today is because of Casey.
He put his GL in my hand. He gave me, he would show me Final Cut Pro. He told me about the school that I should go to, which I went to. Casey's been there, and he's been a mentor for over 10 years now for me.
It's awesome.
Yeah, the connection comes full circle.
Right, yeah. And, and he was an early part in getting 616 off the ground with me making that first video. That wasn't really a 616 video. It was just a video of Michigan and bladers, but it was the dudes that I skated with, and it was a way, though, for me to get more stuff out there. And so, I was handing out, when I went to NorCal, I was handing that video out. Then I went down the second half of my break and stayed with Lawrence Ingram from 50/50, and at the time Sequence Mag fame, and he introduced me to the whole industry and the SoCal. I mean, that was back then. That was it. That was the heart and soul of rollerblading, was Southern California. He was right there in Huntington Beach and in Costa Mesa, and that was it. And then he took me down to Daily Bread in San Diego, and all the just connections that I made through him, all stemming from me going to Casey's parents and having a place to crash, and then meeting Lawrence and going down there. And that's the first kind of point where I realized, so going there and meeting Lawrence and seeing the industry was my first introduction to rollerblading as a business, and seeing that this was really viable. I pull up in my rental car to the office for it's 50/50 in England at the time, and they're getting ready to introduce USD. So I come in and I'm hanging out at Lawrence's desk, and these skates come in for Champion Baumstimmler, and they're like the original prototype thrones, and I'm looking at these, first time I'd ever seen anything like it, and it's like, oh yeah, this is some company from Germany, they're coming over, and they're putting a team together and all this, and this is real. I'm looking outside, and Brooke Howard Smith is there. Obviously he was involved in the Senate, and they were killing it at the time, but he's driving this super nice Audi, and Jess D's got an Audi, and I'm like, these guys are they're living in a super expensive area in the country to live in. They're driving nice cars. They're making it. This is legitimate business. So I said, okay, if they can do it, why can't I? And so that's when I started my last year of college, really focusing on, okay, how do I make 616 a real business once I graduate and live off this? So
you're in California. You met Casey. You're turning 616 into a business. Encode hasn't come out, but you met Drew Backrack, right? Tell us a little bit about how the story continues.
Yeah, so obviously Drew is from Detroit, so I was going to up to Modern in East Lansing for a skate shop just to get stuff, and then out to Airborne had just kind of opened just after that, the Nissan 96, and that's when I met a lot of the guys in Detroit, because I'd known some of the guys from Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids. And Brian Sorg was one of those early guys that kind of became famous, I guess, from Michigan. And he introduced me a couple of the guys from Detroit that he knew, and just getting around those guys, Drew and Mark Thomas at the time, who was kind of the godfather of skating in Detroit, and just meeting some of those guys, realizing, okay, there's some talent here in Michigan that maybe people aren't seeing, and maybe these guys are the first guys. Brian Sorg is one of the first guys I sponsored to get on 616, because he was actually hooked up with Lawrence from 50/50. He was on 50/50 Flow, so he was actually starting to get a name for himself, and so I thought, okay, this is perfect. He's starting to make a name for himself, so I can kind of tag on to that maybe a little bit. People see 616 when they see Brian. And then realizing, though, there was more younger talent there. So when I graduated, okay, I was like, I got to do this for a living, so what am I going to do? I can't obviously right off the bat make a paycheck. So I was starting to figure out how I was going to be able to just live. So I decided, okay, I could go and be an instructor and a counselor at Woodward for the summer. That would kind of, one, give me a place to live, some money, and open me up to a whole gang of skaters that have never seen or heard of 616. So I was kind of using that as a multi-tool to promote 616 while also paying for 616. So I moved home. My parents let me come back home. I basically started an office in the basement, like literally started my business in the basement.
In what town was this?
In Waterville. And they were cool, and really supportive, even though my dad really wanted me to come and work for him. I think part of that helped just being that he owned his own business. His father owned his own business. He understood that kind of entrepreneur in wanting to do something. And so even though he thought it was completely crazy, like rollerblading was a joke to him, like there was no way I'm making, a living off of doing this, it wasn't real. So got in at Lake Owen first. Lake Owen and Woodward were kind of sister camps. It was in Wisconsin. Went up there and worked there, counselor, instructor. I think I was there for like a month, and then went home for like a couple weeks, and then went out to Woodward East. And same thing there, instructor, counselor, and that's when I met. After we had started with Brian Sorg and Mark Thomas on 616, and then a local Kalamazoo guy, John Cunningham. We're kind of like first three like sponsorships. While working at Woodward, I met Josh Amaker. He was also an instructor and counselor there, and just good dude all around, happy-go-lucky, a lot of fun. Just really kind of we clicked. So. Got him to join. He was actually funny at the time. His nickname was Fuel at camp because he was sponsored by a company called Fuel, which was really a BMX company, but it was from his kind of hometown, and that's why they hooked him up. But it was obviously a BMX company, so as soon as I offered him to be on 616, he was like, yeah, absolutely. So and then Brian Sorg came to camp with a whole crew of dudes from Michigan, and that's when he actually introduced me to Brian Murphy. And the first session we went and skated, I remember the mini ramp in Bud's Barn at the time, and Brian dropped in and just started destroying this mini ramp, like skating faster than anybody had ever skated that ramp, like that I had ever seen. It was just like, who in the heck is this kid, man? Like I'd been around Detroit, but I'd never heard of him or never seen him or anything, and it just blew me away. And like by the end of the week, I was like, dude, you got to be on 616, like for sure. And he was all about it. So I learned, or I helped really grow not just the business by obviously every kid that was in my cabin. I gave them a sticker or like offered to sell them shirts. So they were buying gear, and so I was growing my business. I was making connections. I was finding new talent for the team, and I was getting a paycheck because it wasn't costing me anything to be at Woodward. Plus, I was skating every day, nonstop, so it was just like, it was a really great time. Everything was good. At the end of the summer, I realized, okay, prior to that, I realized, okay, at the end of the summer, I'm going to have to do something, and, the company's still not going to be at a point where I'm going to be able to live off of it or anything, so I knew I had to still do something else. And so same thing happened. I figured, I found something online from ASA was looking for people to run their amateur events, the competitions. And obviously being business and marketing, and I thought, I can handle this, no problem. So contacted ASA, got involved with them. So after camp, went back home, and it was really, I was only home for a couple months, and before we had everything settled where I was going to start working for the ASA. I was going to be the Midwest amateur director, running all the amateur events in the Midwest. Went down, we had like a directors meeting where they brought in all the directors. There was an East Coast guy, a Southwest, and like a West Coast and Northwest. So every division had their own guys at the time because there was so many ASA Am contests going on. That was the pro, that was the feeder system for the pros at the time. So they had all these directors doing each region. So we met, did all that. I met a lot of guys that later went on to run a lot of the bigger events, X Games and that kind of stuff. and even other guys like Jason Hines, who at the time worked at a skate park in Miami, SFX, which was where Frankie Morales came from. And so Jason like knew Frankie since he was a kid, was like personally like buying Frankie skates and stuff and like helping him out. And Jason's a really good guy and still doing event production now for Red Bull. So he again honed his teeth in rollerblading, took it on, and now is corporate with producing events, Red Bull standalone events. Wow. Everything from F1 racing to cliff diving to the backcountry snowboard stuff they do, and like he does it all. So, perfect example. Learn from rollerblading and then take it out into the rest of the world. So being involved with ASA was another great opportunity for me to make money doing something I enjoyed, and it gave me this huge introduction to kids and skaters across the country that I would probably never have met or been in contact with. So now I'm getting paid to go to Minnesota and meet the Frenches and Chris Farmers, and I'm getting paid to run events in Detroit when I would have gone anyways just to go skate airborne and hang out with Brian and Mark Thomas and those guys. And so it was just a perfect opportunity. And every time I go to a contest, I'm getting paid to rent a van and drive there, and I could take my buddy Kane, who was trying to do 616 with me, who is also doing all our photography stuff, who again went on and is now a freelance photographer and has worked for like Crate and Barrel and Sears Catalog, all because he started shooting rollerblading to be his part of the business side of 616. It was just we needed something to do photography for ads and website and all that stuff. So Kane decided he would do that. He went and bought a camera on his own money, and that's how he did it. And so now we're going to events. So I'm getting paid to get a van to throw Kane and Mark Thomas and Brian Murphy and drive to these ASA. So not only can they skate in the competition to qualify for the regional and then go to finals and try and become pro, and I'm going there. They're wearing my gear. We're meeting other people, other skaters, and hanging out with them, and that's how I hooked up, with Mike French in Minnesota. I met Chris Farmer, and it was funny because he actually tagged along when we went to go film on a street session. Like, he was much younger than anybody else at the time, and we were skating this rail, and he was like a robot. It was crazy because he would go and he would do a trick, and then he'd do it switch, or he would do, he was just methodical in the way even at a very young age, and his style was very robotic at the time. And I remember because I was like, because one of the guys asked me, he's like, hey, this kid Chris is really good, like, you think you might be interested in sponsoring him or something? And I was like, yeah, he's not really the style of skater that I'm looking for. Funny story is, fast forward later at Bitter Cold one year, after an ASA contest, I was like, man, Chris, like, your style has really evolved and everything. And I literally was like a week late from asking him to get on 616 again because Denial had just asked him to join their team.
Oh, wow.
So I was just like, I should have done it back in the day. But, the ASA gave me this huge pool of talent that really no one else was finding yet. And that's how I found a lot of the guys. That's how I found, Jeff Stockwell. I didn't find from an ASA, but through going to ASAs and meeting a guy in Minnesota, Jeff Erdman, who later went on to move out to California and run Box Magazine, lived like just a couple houses down from Stockwell, and was watching Stockwell skate these benches one day. And he went out and he was like, you rollerblade, and so he's like, Stockwell's like 14 at the time. And so Jeff was feeding me info about Jeff Stockwell, and saying, this kid's, he's got talent and everything. And so being able to travel around a lot, I saw a lot of guys at a young age. Like I said, I went out to the X Games skate park in Colorado. I ran the contest there, saw Brian Aragon. Same thing. He destroyed the course. He won the contest hands down. But he was very robotic, at the time. I didn't see that his style would evolve to what it ended up being, but another chance, that I missed. But I was getting these opportunities because I was out there traveling, doing these events, and seeing these kids at a young age before they were sponsored AMs or let alone pros. And that's where I think 616 got in with a lot of guys early. Don Bambrick, of course, just being from Detroit, he was coming. And same thing, I saw him. He was entering not even the advanced competitions. He was in like the 12 and under contests at Airborne that I was running. So I was just finding opportunities to meet guys way before anybody else was getting introduced to them. And that was one of the things that I felt really helped 616 kind of push itself into more of a mainstream thing. Was just finding talent from different areas and getting them before anybody else, had a chance to get to them, and not only help them make a name for themselves, but them help promote 616. It was a great, you help us, we help you situation.
616 originates in the Midwest, and you start picking up skaters from, say, Minnesota, from California. How do you start capturing media content for them? Photo, video, and getting them out to different areas. How does that all work, and how does sort of the 616 encode start developing?
Well, a lot of that was just born out of necessity. Like I said, ASA was giving money to rent a van to go to a contest, so I'd fill that van up with whoever I could. And there was times we were going to events where I was just taking homies from Detroit or Grand Rapids who weren't on 616, just wanted to go to the contest, and I had a hotel, they could sleep on the floor, so I was just trying to help whoever I could with what I had. So the reason, obviously, I started sponsoring guys in Michigan first, because those were my connections, and then as I started going to events in the Midwest, because I was the Midwest director, I was meeting guys in the Midwest, so those were the guys that I could touch. So I could get to Minnesota, and when we go to a contest, after the contest, I could take Mike French in the van with Kane and go out and shoot a photo for an ad. We could drive through Chicago and pick up Mike Radabaugh to go to Minnesota to go shoot an ad. It was a necessity to have guys close that I could get to, because I couldn't spend the money on a plane ticket to go to Texas to go shoot a section with Chris Fleener or something, because I just didn't have the money to do it at the time. So I had to we worked it all around events, really. It was ASA funded the ads that we shot for Daily Bread in the beginning and BMAG. It funded filming a good chunk of the encode, and it was Drew hopping in and going with us, and us grabbing the guys and filming when we could, and then as the company finally evolved, we started making money enough to where we could pay Drew to do a video, and we could fund a couple flights to either us take a couple guys from Michigan out to California, or fly someone in, fly Fleener in from Texas, and I'll film and stay with Mike Radabaugh at his apartment when he was going to school there, that kind of thing. So it was still very low budget, but at least we had some budget. It was better than the no budget that we started with. So we just, we were really creative in the ways we did it. And Drew was in film school at the time, so it was perfect. He was gung-ho for it. He's a huge supporter of just rollerblading, from way back in the day to even today. The dude loves blading and does so much to support it, and has worked and given a lot with very little given back to him. And not that a lot of people in rollerblading haven't done that, but he's definitely done a lot of that, and it was something. It was a lot of fun, being a lot of guys. We were all hungry at the time, and almost all the guys were either amateur, like sponsored AMs, or just turned ASA pro. Like the one year we went to Florida, and it was, and Mike Radabaugh turned pro that year, and Brian Murphy turned pro that year, and maybe Chris Fleener. I think Chris Fleener turned pro. So we had three AMs basically. We had an entire team of AMs, and 3 of them turned pro that year. So that was like, now, okay, we could go to an ASA pro event. I could get Brian and Mike in the car, and we'll drive down to Kentucky for the ASA pro event. I would get paid to work it by ASA to either judge or to be a course director. So I'm making money. I'm getting a hotel room. The guys are crashing on the floor with me. So we just kind of parlayed all that into really making it happen. And Drew, we grabbed Drew and we'd go down and after the contest we'd go out and we'd film street, and that would basically how Encode kind of happened. It's just those trips and a lot of hotel floors.
Encode was a very, very interesting skate film. Short, had a lot of crazy clips kind of spliced together. How long did that project take to shoot, edit, produce? How did that develop? It was such a strange thing that we've never seen. Do you think it influenced sort of the generation of today? You see a lot of like movie clip style edits. Just tell us a little bit about
Encode. Is 100% Drew Bacharach. And it's really the only way I could put it. I think the only even idea that he maybe even ran by me was the concept of making it a team video. We didn't want everyone to have the individual sections. We wanted it to be everyone as a part of the video, because that's how we were. We were all a tight-knit family, and that's what we wanted to portray in the video. So as opposed to everyone getting their own section like traditionally, he was like, what if we just made a team video? It was clips of everyone at every spot, and it just all meshed together like we would in a session. And I was like, yeah, that sounds a really good idea. And the whole art concept, it was him being at film school, in Chicago, and Drew's mind works in a different way than most people's, definitely different than mine. So like when he sent me the rough cut of it, I was like, what in the world is going on? It was cool because originally I was worried about how short it was, but we had talked about, we wanted something, because you want to put something in before you go out in session that get you juiced and get you pumped up to go skate. But you can't really watch a whole VG and keep that feeling and then go skate. You're sitting there for an hour plus. So we wanted it short and sweet and action packed and really kind of less filler skating. And I think maybe that's where the whole just filler transitions and crazy art and random clips that Drew dug out of the woodwork for that thing. And he was probably one of those first guys that looked at it from kind of maybe an art school or artist perspective, where the guys that were doing it were making more of a obviously VG was a video magazine. They went that route. That wasn't the idea that of a film, an actual film. And I think Drew was maybe one of the first ones to kind of approach it like that. And you hated it or loved it, it seemed like. We got a lot of grief for it. People complaining after they bought it that it was too short or was too weird. And that was right when DVD first came out. When that was one of the things we talked about, is we wanted to be on the cutting edge. We wanted to be like the first DVD produced, and I think a couple things like a VG. And I think Tyler Shields was making a video at the time. I think it was War. And they actually came out on DVD before ours. But from the get-go, we were all about making it for the DVD. So the VHS we released first just because everyone had VHS. And we weren't sure if DVD format was, going to fly or whatnot, how many we were going to sell. But the idea was always to have extra content for the DVD. We thought a lot about the menus, about the secret hidden stuff that you could find and search through. Drew had thought all that through, and so even though maybe we weren't the first one to come out on DVD, we were definitely the first video that was made for DVD specifically. Like from the get-go, we outlined the whole project for DVD.
Wow.
And if you bought the VHS, you almost should have bought the DVD because there was so much little extra stuff in there that you didn't get on the VHS. All the hidden content and bonus stuff. And
the whole video actually played continuously through. And that video, I can't remember if it had titles or not. I think it didn't have titles.
No titles.
No titles.
No
so
titles.
You could actually have to watch the person and decide
Exactly.
which 616 guy's style that was. But then later you could go and watch, each individual person and identify that.
And that was making that team thing that was part of it. Is there was a lot of these guys, like I said, who they were really just sponsored amps, so they weren't really known. They weren't any big names at the time on 616, really. So, even Jeff Stockwell, who later would become huge name in blading, obviously wasn't there yet. And so, yes, that's exactly what we wanted. Was you'd have to figure out who that was and learn them. And the DVD gave you that option to watch all their clips individually, so you could figure it out later. Or if you just wanted to pop something in real quick and watch, just watch Stockwell's section or quote unquote section, you could.
And the sections were actually raw with no music too, which was really
straight
cool.
clips.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's also super sick because when you watch that, it's a whole different feeling. No music, and no weird clips spliced between, just raw skating with sound.
Yep. And this throws back to we talked about before a company called ELF out of Michigan that Drew was involved with. He made a video for them called In Code. That was this was the whole thing, but I never even seen the video until Drew had shown it to me for the DVD bonus. And I was in that scene, and I had never heard of it or seen it. So, let alone someone, out in California would have no clue. They probably never even heard of ELF. Yeah. So, it was cool by using that name as a tip of the hat to ELF and the original In Code, and then including that video in the bonus features, or it might have been one of the hidden sections. So you still had to hunt for it. And I remember being on BMAG message board and people asking like, "Hey, did you find this?" And I was moving my cursor and something highlighted, and they clicked on it, and it was, this bonus stuff. So it was cool, like people finding those Easter eggs, and and just a whole different kind of idea of skate videos. It was kind of, I think, came from that and came from Drew. And I ended up just putting it in my computer and pulling up the chapter menus and finding all of them and watching them.
So In Code was actually in code to some degree.
Fully.
Yeah. You developed not only a great brand, but you started developing soft goods, and then you started taking it to media with, getting your images all over in print magazines and in videos. And it seems like you were even trying to push the boundaries with video to some degree at that moment. You talked a little bit about 616 not wanting to just be a clothing company and actually wanting to provide accessories. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Since day one, when I decided, okay, this isn't just a crew and we're going to make this a company, it was 616 rollerblading accessories. I didn't want to be a clothing company just because anybody could make clothing, and I felt like at the time there's no way I could compete with Senate or later England. The quality of stuff they were doing, and that was never my intent. It started out as T-shirts because that's the easiest, it's the most accessible. Anybody can make a T-shirt, so I could make T-shirts, I could sell T-shirts, and I could take that money and fund other projects. But from day one, I wanted to make stuff that was beneficial. And the gel shock absorber was our first accessory because I had bruised my heels on a Gap. And I said, there's got to be something. And, I went to the Foot Locker looking for insoles, and I started cutting up foam insoles to just use the heel pad, or trying different inserts. Dr. Scholl's had a little gel thing, and that's what kind of sparked the whole idea. I was like, okay, this is kind of good, but it wasn't thick enough and it didn't shape the way I needed it to shape. So that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to create something people actually needed. Like I said, anybody could do a T-shirt, anybody, even pants. We later made, chino pants and cargo pants and shorts and all that stuff. But, what good did that necessarily do? Anybody could do that. You could go buy them anywhere. And
you even had some of the other accessories that you had actual rollerblade shoelaces with the 616 label on it, and you also had 616 palm sliders. Talk about some of these products that we don't necessarily see on the market today, but it seems like you were providing shock absorbers, laces, like all these interesting things that were actually accessories to blading. We don't see many accessory companies nowadays.
Right. And it was kind of a thing in the day. You know, Senate was the pioneer of that. They had everything. You know, they had combs. You know, people started spinning combs on their finger because Senate made combs. Like, it became a thing. You know, and we just wanted to do stuff that you needed. So yeah, obviously everyone needs skate laces. Like, everybody has a pair of skate laces. So we wanted to make something that was a little different. So I'm a big sneakerhead. I've always been into shoes and Jordans and that kind of thing. So the little lace, the rubber lace tab was mandatory for me. I wanted that little, instead of a Nike swoosh on my shoes, I wanted the 616 on my skates, on my laces. So that's why we developed, you know, what we thought was a little bit more durable lace, and then added those rubber tabs so everyone knew those were 616 laces. And we tried different colors just to, you know, so you could coordinate it and match it to your skate setup. And, you know, yeah, and just different accessories. The palm slider is a great one. Again, it just came out of necessity. Stockwell had started doing these hand slides at the cement parks, and we went somewhere, and I'd flown in, picked up Jeff. We went somewhere to skate, and we were standing there, and he did something, and he had his hands up, and I saw his palm, and it was like raw. You know, he had calluses and scars on his palm from doing those slides on the concrete. You know, he said, yeah, we start talking about it. And he's like, yeah, you know, it doesn't matter if you wax it, it's, you know, you're sliding across it fast on your skin, you know, it burns it. And I was like, well, what if we made something, you know, that you could that was lightweight, that you'd wear, that protected your palm. We had made wristbands, because being at Woodward, no one wanted to wear elbow pads. All the kids were using sweatbands as elbow pads. So I started making sweatbands strictly to sell at Woodward for kids to use as wrist or as elbow pads. You know, and it was kind of the style at the time. Guys were using them, but we had done those, and we had some later. We started with literally buying athletic ones from Foot Locker or someplace and getting them embroidered, to later getting woven ones made with our logos embedded into them. So we knew we could get stuff made like that. So Jeff and I started talking about it. You know, what if we just cut a hole? We basically cut a hole in one of our sweatbands and use that at first, and then decide, okay, we need to add a little bit more padding and then some reinforcement. And again, just born out of necessity. Like a lot of the stuff we had done, and that was always what I wanted to do. I just wanted to make stuff. Like I think I've said it 10 times now, you know. But that was always my goal. I just wanted to make stuff that people could actually use, and that would actually better their time skating. You know, that was always the goal. And that then parlayed into Knight Hardware, and doing all the hardware and hard goods stuff that we later did down the road. And, you know, I partnered with Al DeLego, who had great ideas, and then obviously I had the business side of it in the distribution. So unfortunately that ran into a manufacturing hiccup. I actually had a friend who, once we started it, decided to quit his job and basically build a little bit of a machine shop in his garage and make all of our parts. So he came from tool and die, so he knew machining, he knew CNC, he had all that background. He wasn't a skater at all, so it was you know, we had to educate him on a lot of stuff. But basically one day he just decided he didn't want to do it anymore. And so all of our...
That was the end of Knight.
Yeah, that basically was, you know, we tried to transition it, but it took so long. It was really just kind of the nail in the coffin, and we were never able to really recover from that.
And it sounds like not only did you help Knight Hardware, but you've helped my brother with Haunted Wheels a little bit. Yeah. So, and you know, there's a couple people that we've done that with. So after Knight kind of died down, and I started transitioning away from just integrated in 616 and everything in blading to other things. Other businesses, and splitting my time up.
I started Halo Supercars, and we started acquiring equipment to be able to build parts for cars. And then I realized, okay, this is all the stuff that I needed 10 years ago, and Knight would have been a huge, we would have taken over the whole parts industry, if I had the machines and the equipment that I have today. Sky was the limit. I mean, we literally can build anything now. Unfortunately, now I don't have the time, and obviously with the industry that rollerblading, the state of the industry that rollerblading is in, it's not cost effective for me to produce stuff. Now that I have the equipment, it's a bittersweet. But I've been able to do stuff for other people, helping Matt make the anti-rockers, which were it's a Knight hardware anti-rocker, which became a 616 anti-rocker, and now it's a Haunted anti-rocker. Because it's a great anti-rocker with the angled edges for set slides and not catching, and it's a great design from Al, and a couple other companies have knocked it off and kind of stolen the design. But we weren't making them, so it's fair game. So be it. It was a good idea. Someone should make it. So I'm not hating on anybody for doing it. So and there's a couple other people that we've done that. We talked to Dead about doing some stuff that never came to fruition, and Julio doing some stuff for Them Goods, and we made some sole plates. Oso Boots was a short-lived company. We made the sole plates for them. Core Skates, we made sole plates for them. And we've talked to a couple other companies about doing some stuff. And, who knows? I've got the ability to do it, so it's just a matter of finding time. That's really kind of where I'm at now, is that trade-off. Obviously, I've got family, I've got kids, so I've got very well-paying jobs that I'm producing and manufacturing. So if I'm shutting down my machine to run a skate part that doesn't really pay me any money, it's a tough sell, especially since I have a business partner so that doesn't rollerblade and can care less about rollerblading. So, but yeah, who knows? Sky's the limit. If someone was interested, if someone maybe listening has an idea, I'm game to try and help anybody out that I can, or if things change and there's maybe a resurgence in blading.
Absolutely, you have the manpower, the knowledge, and the history.
We had a frame. I brought it to, I think, the last Bitter Cold.
Yeah,
and
I remember seeing
demoed
that.
it and had it on display. It was a frame idea that I had. It really came out because I had the ability now to do whatever I wanted, so I did it.
What was the frame type?
So I was distributing 50-50, and Jess was having a problem with the manufacturing and the core frames he was doing at the time. They wanted to up his quantity of cores that he had to make, and to like something crazy. Like, he was producing, I think, a couple hundred sets of frames at a time, and they wanted him to do like 5,000 cores, which back in the day would have been fine. He probably did that in his sleep, and it wouldn't have been a big deal. But now, like I said, he was doing batches of maybe 200 frames. So he was like, I can't get cores, but they'll still make me walls. Could you make me cores? So I sat down, we looked at it, and we figured out how we can make cores. It's basically just a piece of aluminum. We'd CNC the shape out, put it in a bender, bend the edges down, and then put it in a press brake and press the UFS dimples into it and throw it in a core or in a wall. And when I was doing that, I said, well, okay, wait a second. If I can do that and I can machine my own walls, if I did an H block, I wouldn't have to do a mold. I can machine each wall separately and then machine an H block and bolt it all together. So it was basically from having done that exercise with Jess for making the cores, I realized I could make my own frame. This was kind of the time when I was really focused on a couple of my other businesses. I was really getting involved in the propane business. And Halo was really starting to take off. We were actually starting to become to a point where we had more work than we could handle, and we were backlogged. And so I made the prototype frame. I got a couple out there. I had a couple guys testing them. We had some revisions we needed to make to make it stronger, and it just came down to the time I needed to get on the machines. I couldn't do it.
Right.
I couldn't sacrifice for maybe making a frame that maybe would become a product down the road. So that it just kind of ended there. I made one kind of revised version, and the second revision that we were going to do, I just never finished it. So maybe one day we'll jump back on. I'll make that revision, and it'll be a legit frame, and you'll be able to buy it somewhere. I don't know.
So tell me a little bit about Blood, Pride, and True and sort of the wrap-up of 616.
So as I guess things progressed, there came a point where ASA and almost competitions in general started really dying off. So my kind of feeder system that I was finding guys before anybody else kind of went away. So the team kind of became almost stagnant, where I had the same guys on, and some of them were starting to get out of, or maybe not necessarily get out of blading, but they weren't focused on, necessarily being professional bladers anymore. Vanderboegh was going to school, and then he broke his leg, and that kind of ended things for him. And he just really didn't want to do it anymore on that kind of level. And just people were getting jobs and having to deal with life in the real world, and not necessarily chasing a dream of being a professional blader. So it became more difficult to get everybody together to go out and film sections and do that thing, and get them motivated as well. I'd been a big supporter of Bitter Cold Showdown from the beginning. Daniel Kinney and I had become good friends, and we're working together a lot, preparing and doing stuff for Bitter Cold. And he was doing videos, and I actually started distributing some of the videos he was doing. And that's how our relationship kind of grew. And then I said, I was watching his growth, and each video that he did got better and better. Like I said, his first one wasn't so great, but as he evolved, I said, hey, maybe he'd be a perfect guy to do the next 616 video. And we were at a kind of that crossroads point where we had a couple young guys. We had made some changes with the team where I had gotten to know Cameron Card pretty well, and the one big thing about that is I wanted 616 was always an extension of myself. I would only put guys on that I enjoyed watching skate. There might have been guys, and I know there was guys, especially like within Michigan, that thought they should have maybe got a chance to be on 616, but I wasn't really into their skating. Not that they weren't good skaters and that kind of thing. Just other guys, they just had to fit, and I had to like their skating, and enjoy watching them skate and enjoy skating with them. So, and Cameron's a great example of a guy like that I'd gotten to know a little bit at events and seeing him here and there, and he was a great guy, great skating style and everything, and it just clicked and things worked out. So he came on. We had a couple younger guys from Michigan, Mikey Blair, started coming up and just killing it. So we were at this point where, we were losing some of the old team. We had some new guys coming in. So we decided, it was time to kind of do one big team video to either rebrand 616 or kind of almost, even though I didn't say it, it was kind of maybe a tip of the hat, a signal to the end of an era, because I was already starting to be involved in other businesses. So I was slowly divesting myself of that.
The name Blood, Pride, and True, did that spawn from sort of this American-made company, Blood, Pride, and True, putting all your work and effort into this? What does Blood, Pride, and True mean?
Especially with Daniel being from the Midwest as well. It was great, working with guys And I didn't really talk about this before, I guess. I went out to California a lot in the beginning. I even before I started the company, I saw the industry out there, and I knew if I moved to California after I graduated college that I could make it. Rollerblading was alive and well in Southern California. It would be easy to do everything there. The manufacturer base was there, connections were there, skaters were there, but I didn't feel it was necessarily the easy route. I almost felt it was like a cop out. Like I was leaving to go join the kind of the industry as it was, as opposed to bettering it by bringing in a different look, approach. There's always a lot of pride. I think Michigan has a lot of pride. Just people from Michigan, maybe it's because of the automotive industry and that whole just thing. But you see it today, with all the like craft beer and that kind of thing. Michigan made is a big thing, and I always wanted to be that. I wanted to stay in the Midwest. I wanted to find guys in the Midwest and introduce them to the world, and introduce the world to the Midwest. Not that I was the first one. I mean, there was Scribe in Minnesota back in the day. There was companies out of Chicago, Hex and Jinx, and obviously Detroit companies and stuff. So it's not like I was the first one to do this. It's just I felt it was something I needed to do. And so, so Midwest, Americana, pride, that all just kind of fit myself, fit Daniel Kinney, fit a lot of the guys. Obviously, there was a lot of blood involved in the blading over the years.
Steven Duraza's brother, Dustin Duraza, he actually got one of the worst cases of blood from that incident. He was featured on Scar, right? For the filming of 616.
I filmed that.
Oh, wow.
I was there.
So we don't have to go into grotesque detail, but yeah, he was grinding a rail and the rail broke off, and the kind of the small support beams got stuck in his leg and broke off, and then he walked away, and I think he only has a certain percentage of his muscle still regained from that.
Yeah.
Amazing skater, used to do the most steezy fast top miss trials in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was one of those freak, we were skating. Yeah, it was one of those rails connected to a ledge, and the weld on the support broke and the rail fell down, but the support was sticking out from the ledge and went just straight into the side of his leg, flipped him upside down and ripped the whole side of his leg open. Jeez. And we were in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. So luckily, the University of Michigan hospital is not too far. Basically, just I grabbed a clean pair of socks out of the back of my car and wrapped it around his leg. Don and I think and Dustin's brother Steve were there. We basically jumped in the car. I ran him to the hospital, to the ER, and what I think ended up being a problem is he ended up getting like an infection or something in the hospital, which he was there for like 2 or 3 months or something crazy, and that's what made it way worse than what it would have been. But it was a gnarly, crazy random accident, and some blood. Yeah,
and now I remember Mikey Blair's section was phenomenal from that, arguably one of his best sections to date. And then Brian Murphy, one of his only sections that you've seen in a blade video, and closing section, phenomenal, very fast, crazy stunts. He broke his leg in that video too, didn't he?
Yeah, so we went to Florida to film. We stayed, like my family had a condo in Florida, and it was the winter, so we jumped everybody in my expedition and drove down. We picked up Jeremy Stevenson, photographer, on the way through Atlanta. We picked him up and went down and was in Sarasota, Florida, and we were skating like up in Tampa. Made a lot of connections with some guys and found spots, and we're filming just all over the place down there in Florida. It's kind of the big thing. We flew in JC from California at the time, and Cameron had already hit his head prior to this trip, so he was kind of already out of the thing. Luckily, he had so much footage stacked prior to that. He was able to come through with a really awesome section, and thankfully, the head injury ended up being not as bad as maybe it could have been. that was a really scary incident filming for it. I had never had anything that serious happen, with anybody in skating that I had been involved with, and it was really scary. It was it kind of made you change thought process, and it really kind of opened my eyes to a few things that I never really talked to a lot of people about, and why I started looking at this being maybe my transition out of things.
Oh wow!
That it was a lot. It was heavy, thinking that someone got potentially fatally hurt filming for a video I was trying to make. There was a lot of responsibility I felt, and it really got weird with Cameron, myself, not Cameron's fault, that I didn't know how to respond and deal with the situation, and I didn't know what to do and what to say with Cameron, so we kind of lost and fell out of connection there for a little while, which I really regret, and we've since talked about, and I actually went and stayed with him at Woodward this past New Year's and had a great conversation about all this. But it was just a weird time and it really made me contemplate a lot of different things. And so that's why things transitioned. And then while we're filming in Tampa, fluke trick, Brian catches a skate in a groove on a landing off a ledge and snaps his leg. And it was just like, it was just that was really the kind of the like, all right,
Yeah, I was gonna say 3 nasty injuries.
Yeah. It was kind of all right. Where does this go from here? And so that was part of the reason. So that was definitely kind of Brian's end to I would say like that kind of level of skating. Too, similar thing with when Mike Radabaugh shattered his leg. He's already working, and so he's got other things to worry about, and it's not like I was paying him a ton of money. If anything, he had a royalty from a T-shirt, so, and we were paying for the going on filming, but at the same time, like you said, Mikey Blair really stepped up, especially on that trip. Like, I was stressing out hard. The guys could tell you, like I was freaking out, because people would go to spots and didn't either want to skate them just because they just weren't feeling the spot or just the day they weren't into it, and I was starting to get a little agitated, and it was I was probably being a pretty big jerk, actually, now that I think about it in hindsight. But
the funding's probably you can see the funding being distracted. You're putting funding into it and hoping that the guys put their level and just not. It all happened.
It really boiled down to one night. We went to Home Depot and rented a generator, and I'm paying cash for this generator, and we go out to film, and every spot we go to, no one is feeling it, and I was just like, why the crap did I just spend all this money on this generator? We could have, and that was my business side, because at the end of the day, I did need to fund this video, and if I spent a bunch of money on it, then we wouldn't make as much profit. And one of the things that I wanted to do with the profit was pay these guys for their sections. So the video, in my eyes, needed to be profitable for them, and my business, because at this point, though, I wasn't really living off 616 money anymore. I was pouring all the money back into the company just because sales weren't what they used to be, and I had other businesses that I was making living off of, so I didn't need to anymore. I could get the guys royalties on T-shirts, even though we weren't selling the fraction of the T-shirts we used to, but it was something for me to give back to them.
So again, sort of reflecting on that name, Blood, Pride, and True. A very, very good name for that when you're trying to pour your whole soul back into the blade industry.
Yeah.
As it's sort of peaking out a little bit.
So it was a kind of a bittersweet, though, because so we had Cameron, we had Brian, kind of, and those era, and then Mikey, though, come up, and that was the light that I had on that trip down in Florida, was Mikey. Every time we went to a spot, I remember that that kinked ledge, drop ledge that we skated at the school, and no one really wanted to touch it. And I thought for sure Don would just slay it. And it was weird because it had this rail and then it dropped.
Oh yeah,
and
Royale to drop down.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Mikey about that, and he's like, "That thing was so slippery, man. That shit was crazy." You could see it in that.
And JC had a full-time job, and so he was really struggling with getting footage and getting motivated, even out in California. And coming on this trip, we thought he was going to just stat clips. And it was like everything he went to, he was very particular about, and that frustrated me a little. But I understood it, but it was cool because I was trying to get someone to do this, and no one really wanted to do it. And then Mikey would step up and do it. He was always the one that stepped up, and it showed in his section, And so he stepped up and did it, and his section came out. And it was arguably the best section in that video.
Yeah.
Like, it was a banger. And it was really his big introduction to the entire world that, he had some steez. And
yeah, 616 and Haunted sort of have this interesting dynamic between the two, because you've known Matt Oz forever.
Yeah.
And, but it's interesting that Matt, he picks up Mikey Blair early on as one of the first Haunted riders. And then recently, just a couple months ago, we picked up Don Vanderboegh. So, we got a little bit of a smaller team. We got a 5-man crew, but we still have 40% 616.
Right, there you go.
That blood's still in there. So, yeah. And it's kind of interesting hearing your story. It's very... Haunted seems like kind of a scaled-back version of, what Matt wants to do for blading, similar to what you wanted to do with blading, except for now the funding's a little bit more extracted out of the industry, and things are evolving in everything, in every aspect, from financial to tricks to the way that we perceive things and the way that the market is shifting.
There's so many interesting parts of the conversation that were not recorded. And also not recorded, Mark realized that through our conversations that the marketing efforts of 616 were truly parallel with his efforts with Halo.
Tell me a little bit about Halo, what sort of projects you're working on, what sorts of accessories you have. The Halo is housed in the old 616 warehouse, is that right? And
Yes.
you have an old mini ramp there. And the last time that I saw you was actually, we were filming the Haunted Visits 616 warehouse edit. Super dope on Vimeo. Go and Google it.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell me about where Halo is right now.
I've been a lover of cars since I was little. I grew up around old cars. My dad had a lot of classic antique cars. So I grew up going to car auctions and car shows. And when I got married, funny story, my wife and I started looking for a new church to go to. And we started going to this church that had this new group for people in their 20s and 30s. And so we were like, oh, let's go check this out. And went to it. And first day there, they kind of went around. Everyone introduced themselves, and you had to say like one thing about them, that they a hobby or something. And this one guy stands up, and he's like, my name's Brent Robbins, and I love cars. And then his wife makes some comment about her now having to love cars because of how much and all this. So we just afterwards kind of mingled, and was like, yeah, I'm into cars, and we just started talking and slowly became friends through our mutual love of cars, talking about a car that I wanted to build, because I had started building some custom stuff and on my own with some other friends, and found out that he actually for a while had a job building drag cars, like professional NHRA, like crazy 5,000 horsepower drag cars. So he has legitimate engineering skills and fabrication skills, and I'm doing this out of my garage just for fun. And so we decided to build this Chrysler 300 of mine and make it from a 4-door into a 2-door. We built it basically in his garage. I see the skill that he has, and I'm like, why do you not do this for a living? It's a passion of yours. I'm all about turning my passions into businesses. So I continued to ride him for a good 6-9 months, and finally broke him down and convinced him to go into business with me. And then obviously I already had a building. I just had to move some ramps out. So if you've ever seen any of the edits from the 616 warehouse, we had some down ledges in this one room, and we basically just took all that stuff down, took the quarters and the vert wall down, and made way for some cars and some equipment, and started building custom cars, hot rods. And then we started acquiring machinery so we could do parts. And so we started slowly over the years a catalog of parts that we make for different things. If people are into cars, and we make stuff for certain Camaros and certain Chryslers and different engine swaps, LS engine swaps. We make parts, and we got a whole catalog of things. So we've built equipment, and now that's why I have CNC machines and CNC lathes and mills and plasma tables, and I can make virtually anything because we need to make those things for the cars that we build. And we build cars from the ground up. And that's been a passion and has really taken over a good chunk of my day, along with my other businesses. So I kind of still split time, still work out of that warehouse, and I still have a room in the basement that is filled with skate parts and frames and clothes. I still have a little bit of 616 t-shirts and hats and
616 Museum. When's it going to open up?
Some random DVDs, some 50/50 frames.
Awesome.
And I even still have a little bit of, when I was doing Powerslide, I have a couple like USDs that I stashed in the corner, and some frames and some wheels and some random things. So lots of B-mags.
So it seems like you almost took your the way that you're creating accessories for blading, now you're creating accessories for cars, and
Absolutely.
You kind of took your skills of customizing vehicles and whatnot and took that to the next level. What are some of the big projects or your favorite projects that you've worked on? I believe you've worked in the sort of, your cars have made it into the Hollywood industry, is that right?
We had a car that was on the set for a movie called Real Steel with Hugh Jackman. It was like robot boxing. Actually that 300 that I talked about that we built, it went out to a show in Las Vegas called the SEMA show. It's the convention for aftermarket automotive. It's kind of like the Super Bowl of car shows for builders. And that's how we made a name for ourselves. We did some work there. We built a car for GM that was in the GM booth, Camaro, and then we got invited to bring that car on the set of Real Steel. And just started making connections with people and getting a name. And it's kind of like in rollerblading. If you're a rollerblader and you're coming up and you go to events and you stand out, that's how you do it in the car scene. We would go to car shows, we would win the best of show, and people would see it, or it would get in a magazine, or we'd get interviewed by a company that we used one of their products at SEMA, and it would go on their website and get millions of views, and just build the brand from there.
Was your I remember you having sort of an arsenal of vehicles that you bring to car shows. Is that sort of your marketing tactic when you go to shows?
Yeah, that's entirely how we market. The automotive industry is massive, and to try and get into a Daily Bread ad when I first started 616 was crazy expensive for me, but compared to me trying to go get an ad for Halo in a custom car magazine is astronomical. I mean, they're not even comparable. It's unrealistic. So kind of the way I approached marketing 616 is the same way I'm marketing Halo. I learned what I did in rollerblading worked, and we've transitioned it to cars. And so basically we just go to the biggest car shows. Luckily we're in Michigan, and some of the biggest events for the automotive industry are in Michigan. So it's not expensive for us to pack up a trailer and put a couple cars in it, or drive a couple cars with some guys and go to a car show and display the quality of work we do at those events. And so people see it. People that are going there are also building cars. And it's basically just kind of a word of mouth, grassroots, just like we did in rollerblading, and shoestring budgets, until you get to a point where you can do bigger events and bigger things. And that's what we did. We started at small shows with just our cars in the parking lot, to actually going to big car shows with a booth and having our stuff on display with the other builders and vendors, and just growing it through having stuff for people to see and learn more about us. And that's how it grows.
Your career's transitioned from skating into car and auto and accessories. Do you have any last words for blading or bladers out there?
I guess I'd just say, like we talked about before, blading is a great kind of niche, small, tight-knit community, family almost, even though it's fractured in a lot of ways, and you obviously you go online and everyone's hating on everyone, but at the same time, it's brought so many people together, and over the years, from way back in the day to today, and it's cool to see now guys like myself that are having kids and maybe getting back into skating more, that they've been away, and their kids are now to a point where they can take their kids skating. And so, it was hard for me to get off of work at 6 o'clock at night and say, I'm going to go to the skate park for an hour instead of going home and playing with my kids who are about to be in bed by the time I get home from the skate park. So, I had to step away. Even though I had a mini ramp in my office, I still, I had a hard time going out and skating on a regular, consistent basis, just because it was a pull. I had to give up something at home, and it wasn't worth it for me. Now my kids are starting to be able to go to the skate park with me. Like a lot of these guys you see on the Bladers Dads Facebook group, or Lawrence Ingram doing the Back to Blading podcast and group. So you're seeing more people come back, and hopefully that's a good thing. And maybe there's a second generation of kids that'll come from that. But I think the biggest thing is whether it's big wheels or core, or whether it's park or street, there's always been kind of groups or factions, and everyone's had their thing. But the thing is that we're all rollerblading, and it's all the same thing when you boil it down. And so, like I said before, when technical ticky-tack stuff started really becoming popular, I wasn't a fan of it. I appreciate it, and I want anybody to do what they want to do. So having those groups of people finding niches that they enjoy is, I think, the key. And as long as everyone's having fun, then that's all that really matters. So why get down on somebody if they want to do wheels, or if someone thinks that you still need to ride anti-rocker, good for them. Like, what does it matter,
Yeah.
Just have fun doing what you're doing. Hopefully, maybe somehow, some way, there's a resurgence. Action sports are all cyclical. I just don't know if rollerblading is the action sport that's one of the fads or one of the cyclicals, and maybe because we're so new, we haven't seen that second wave yet. So I want to believe it's there. And
we've seen the second wave with BMXing, with skateboard. Well, I don't know if skateboarding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Skateboarding, maybe even a third wave. I don't know skateboarding history all that well.
Yep.
But scootering especially. Scootering came out, like in the 90s. Everyone had scooters. It dies off, and then all of a sudden now it's the biggest thing it's ever been.
Right.
And in BMXing, we've seen BMXing go from a huge thing to kind of go down, and then all of a sudden become this bike roots thing, where all of a sudden the bikers are creating their own products, much like bladers are creating their own products now. We have, Wish frames, and everybody's developing new frames, new wheels. Do you think there's a possibility of a second wave of blading, or people? Not everybody is involved with, say, product, but how can people stay positive and contribute back to the success of blading and try to bring that back, sort of thing?
Just helping spread the word, going to your park and not being a dick to little kids on scooters, showing them that rollerblading is cool just by you being there and doing cool stuff, and not being a jerk to them, is saying, oh, maybe that's, that dude's cool. You could be the angry old skateboarder, and then just turn them off to rollerblading as a whole, not just yourself, but rollerblading. But if you're cool and let them do them, maybe they'll just see what you're doing and think maybe they'll want to try it. So just being out there and showing people rollerblading's fun, it's cool, you're enjoying it. Going to events, there isn't a lot of events anymore, I know, but but going to them when there are, and supporting them, that's always a good thing.
Just getting involved, it sounds like, and staying on the wheels and being positive about it. Or skateboarding has always sort of been this azure thing, and I think blading identity, we've kind of done that.
Right.
And maybe we need to sort of get over that and even take it back to the grassroots. I know my first, when I first got on wheels, was at a roller skate rink. A lot of the kids nowadays, you see them at roller skate rinks or hockey. The kids are not necessarily at skate parks. At least the rollerbladers aren't.
Right.
But the rollerbladers are at roller skate rinks, and the rollerbladers are at roller hockey rinks. So I think, if anything, our idea of what blading is needs to shift. We're sort of maturing, or we need to be maturing in order to get through this wave.
Rollerblading started as a rec. There was no aggressive in the beginning. Aggressive came about by there being literally millions of people on rollerblades for fitness. And so I think there almost needs to be some kind of a point where we just need to embrace the fact that the health of rollerblading is improved by people being on skates. Doesn't matter if they're in a skating rink, if they're on a bike trail for fitness, doing 5K, whatever it is, just them being on blades is beneficial for aggressive. And the health of rollerblading in general. So, embracing that and getting people to maybe be able to do innovative products like the switch skates or shadows or dupe or whatever they want to call them, where you can access skates quicker and easier, or change the style of skating quicker and easier, makes it a little bit more accessible, makes people want to maybe do it more. So maybe people that fitness skated in the 90s because it was a fad, and then realized, well, it's a pain in the butt to put my skates on and go do this, as opposed to just go out for a jog or something. Get that mentality back where we embrace all kinds of skating. I think, even though I might not do it, in the health of aggressive skating will benefit from the growth of rollerblading as a whole, because all this came out of fitness and rec. That rollerblade brand started, and if it wasn't for that, there wouldn't be any of us today. So just blade.
Yeah, that's the religion right there. Just blade. I hope that there's going to be lots of people listening to this podcast. Any last shout outs?
Just big shout out to my man Lawrence Ingram, Back to Blading podcast. He was a big part in getting me involved in the industry and seeing the business side of things. Lots of contacts. All the homies from 616 through the years that gave everything. Some of them, more than others. And just everybody in the Michigan scene, Detroit crews, Drew Bacharach, that was involved in helping grow 616, my family for being supportive, even though, like I said, my dad, thought it was a joke. And finally, eventually, when I started getting flown to Korea for X Games, realized, hey, okay, this is legitimate. It's on TV, and that kind of thing. So, but all the time being understanding and allowing me to do it by running an office in their basement and that kind of stuff. So, shout out to my parents for sure for supporting, and my wife for, even before we were married, coming to all the contests when we were dating, getting dragged along to Airborne for events, and going out to California with me for trips, and just So that, and all the dudes with the second generation now with kids, and bringing them up, and keep doing what we're doing, and I think blading will be all right. We don't need anybody to save rollerblading. We just need to keep rollerblading, and it'll work itself out.
Wise words. Thanks for your time, Mark.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Here's a candid conversation I recorded with Mark.
We had some high school help over the summer. Yeah. So one of the jobs I had one of them do was clear everything off the ramp, mop the whole thing down, and so now throughout the day, whenever I walk past it, and I've got a skateboard, I'll just jump on and just like pump a little bit, just to use my legs and to keep it clean and keep people from, if anybody ever puts anything on it, then it's my excuse to yell at them to get it off.
Do you still put on skates and skate
every once in a while? It's just easier. I walk by it, so I can just jump on the board but throughout the day. But yeah, we've taken these guys to the skate park. And
cool. Your little ones ride scooters? Cool.
Yeah. She actually has, well, they both have skates, and she actually likes her skates more. Like, but he can ride most of the ramps on his scooter now.
Oh, okay.
So.
Sounds like Casey's kids are really into it too.
Yeah. It's just so easy for them to pick up. Like, everyone complained, that was the big gripe about rollerblades. They were so easy. The learning curve was so much better than skateboarding. Well, the learning curve on scooters is like the same for rollerblades versus skateboards. Rollerblades versus scooters. It's like they can pick it up so quick.
You got that safety stick.
Yeah. Even more so than a bike.
Right.
It's just because you can step off a lot easier than you can on a bike, on a scooter. So, what?
Lighthouse.
Yeah.
It's there.
616 was one of the longest-running Blader-owned accessory companies, and integrated distribution was also a large part of blading's history. Mark's story contains wisdom and hidden gems that could enlighten future generations of blade companies. It is remarkable that he funded and created a brand that supported blading while leveraging the market power of the blade industry. Mark created one of the strongest blading brands and distributing companies in rollerblading, and his heart was in the right place. His passion and vision was always to support and reinvest into blading. However, the wave of action sports hit blading hard early in the 2000s. Early today's market may not be as fruitful as it once was. Perhaps we can use the lessons from the past to improve the future of blading. Skateboarding, BMX, and scootering have all hit their second or third waves. However, blading has not yet seen its second opportunity. It is up to us and future generations of bladers to innovate and carry the torch of blading. Please support us by visiting our Patreon page at patreon.com/BladerAtPodcast. Sign up to become a Patreon supporter and receive Blader At apparel and other rewards. Follow my work at BradOzPhoto on Instagram or BradOzentowski.com. And follow Haunted Wheelco on Instagram and HauntedWheels.com. Please continue to support local, support blading, and keep the passion alive.